Foundations of Iron, From Myth to Republic. The Roman Empire was not built in a day, but over 1,000 years. Its legacy, in law, language, architecture, and governance, still forms the scaffolding of the Western world. To understand this epical power, we must begin with its humble and legendary origins. The Romans themselves rooted their history in myth. The most famous legend states that Rome was founded in 753 BC by two twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. Abandoned as infants, they were said to have been suckled by a she-wolf, Lupa Capitolina, before growing up to found a new city on the Palatine Hill. A quarrel over which hill should be the center led Romulus to kill Remus, thus founding the city and naming it after himself. Historically, Rome began as a small, unremarkably situated village on the banks of the Tiber River in central Italy. Its early political structure was a monarchy, ruled by a succession of 7 legendary kings. The final kings, particularly the Tarquins, were said to be tyrannical and cruel. Around 509 BC, the Roman people, led by aristocratic families, rose up, expelled the final king, Tarquin the Proud, and established a revolutionary new form of government, the Roman Republic, res publica, public thing. The Republic was defined by 2 central principles: checks and balances and a distrust of concentrated power. Authority was primarily vested in the Senate, an advisory body of elders, and 2 annually elected chief magistrates, the consuls. These consuls commanded the armies and administered the laws, but their power was constrained by their peers and the short duration of their term. Early Roman society was sharply divided into the landowning elite, the patricians, and the common citizens, the plebeians. The early history of the Republic was a constant struggle, conflict of the orders between these 2 groups. As the plebeians fought for political rights and equality, gradually winning concessions like the right to elect their own representatives, the tribunes. This early republic was characterized by resilience, discipline, and an aggressive militarism that defined its expansion across the Italian peninsula. The Romans perfected the art of absorbing their conquered enemies, granting citizenship and military participation in exchange for loyalty. This unique ability to constantly replenish their armies and manpower would prove their most decisive advantage as they prepared to face their first truly existential threat, the Punic Wars. Forging an empire, the Punic Wars and the Mediterranean Master. By the middle of the 3rd century BC, the Roman Republic had successfully unified the Italian peninsula. However, their aggressive expansion brought them into direct confrontation with the only other dominant power in the Western Mediterranean, Carthage. Carthage, located in modern-day Tunisia, was a formidable maritime and commercial empire, controlling vital trade routes and vast territory. The inevitable clash between these 2 titans, known as the Punic Wars, from the Roman word punicus for Carthaginian, was not just a border dispute. It was a desperate struggle for global supremacy. The First Punic War, 264–241 BC, was fought primarily for control of the island of Sicily. Carthage's strength lay in its naval power, while Rome was a land power. In a remarkable feat of adaptability, the Romans rapidly built a massive fleet, inventing the corvus, a boarding ramp, to turn naval battles into land engagements, utilizing their superior infantry. Rome ultimately prevailed, securing Sicily and establishing its first overseas province. The conflict returned with devastating force in the Second Punic War, 218–201 BC. This war is defined by one of history's greatest military geniuses, Hannibal Barca. Hannibal launched an astonishing high-risk invasion of Italy, marching his army complete with war elephants over the Alps. Hannibal inflicted 3 crushing defeats on the Romans, culminating in the Battle of Cannae, 216 BC, where he encircled and virtually annihilated a much larger Roman army, resulting in an estimated 50,000 to 70,000 Roman casualties in a single day. Rome was on the brink of collapse, but Rome's true strength was its unbreakable will and unique citizenship policy. Unlike most empires, Rome refused to surrender, even after devastating losses. They raised new legions, refusing to concede defeat. They adopted a strategy of attrition against Hannibal in Italy, while sending a brilliant young general, Scipio Africanus, to invade Carthage itself. Forced to return home to defend his city, Hannibal was finally defeated by Scipio at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. Carthage was stripped of its territory and wealth. After the Third Punic War, 149–146 BC, which ended with the total destruction of Carthage, famously sown with salt, according to later legend, Rome stood unchallenged. They were no longer a regional power. They were the undisputed masters of the Mediterranean Sea, Mare Nostrum, our sea. This monumental expansion, however, would soon create internal stresses that threatened to tear the very fabric of the Republic apart. The Republic's self-destruction, slaves, reformers, and the rise of generals. Rome emerged from the Punic Wars as a superpower, but its victories sowed the seeds of its own internal destruction. The vast wealth and massive territories acquired from conquest destabilized the delicate political and social balance of the Roman Republic. The core problem was land and manpower. While patrician elites grew fabulously wealthy from provincial revenues and used their riches to buy up huge estates, latifundia, the backbone of the Republic, the small, independent farmers who formed the legions, found themselves unable to compete. They lost their land and flooded into Rome, creating a volatile, poverty-stricken urban proletariat. Two brothers, the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, attempted to solve this crisis in the late 2nd century BC. They championed radical land reforms, proposing to redistribute public land to the poor. Their efforts were met with violent opposition from the Senate, and both brothers were assassinated, setting a chilling precedent. Political disputes would now be settled not by debate, but by bloodshed. As the Republic descended into political violence, the social crisis exploded in the form of a massive slave revolt. From 73 to 71 BC, the Third Servile War was led by Spartacus, a gladiator of Thracian origin. Starting with just 70 fellow gladiators, Spartacus amassed an army of over 120,000 escaped slaves, terrifying the Roman elite and repeatedly defeating consular legions sent to stop him. Spartacus's rebellion exposed the fragility of Rome's social order and the vast scale of its exploitation. Though the revolt was eventually crushed by the armies of Marcus Licinius Crassus and Gnaeus Pompey, the legacy of the rebellion was brutal. Crassus famously crucified 6,000 captured slaves along the Appian Way as a terrifying warning against future insurrections. The Republic's ultimate downfall was sealed by the transformation of its army. A reform by the general Gaius Marius professionalized the military, recruiting landless citizens and swearing their loyalty not to the Republic, but directly to their commanding general. This created immense private armies loyal only to men like Marius, Sulla, Crassus, and Pompey. The stage was now set for the final bloody phase of the Republic's collapse, the era of the powerful, ambitious generals who would use their loyal legions to fight each other for total control of Rome. The greatest of these, and the one whose actions would forever change the course of history, was yet to arrive. The point of no return, Caesar and the fall of the Republic. The breakdown of the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC was dominated by the ambition of three colossal figures who formed the first triumvirate in 60 BC. Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, Gnaeus Pompey, the most celebrated general, and Gaius Julius Caesar, the charismatic politician. Caesar, who initially lacked the military prestige of Pompey, secured the governorship of Gaul, modern France, and spent the next 8 years, from 58 to 50 BC, waging one of the most brutal and successful military campaigns in history. He conquered vast new territories, extended Rome's boundaries to the Atlantic, and crucially forged an army fanatically loyal to him alone. The wealth and fame Caesar amassed threatened his former partners. When Crassus was killed in battle in Parthia, the triumvirate dissolved. The Senate, fearing Caesar's unchecked power and believing him to be an immediate threat to the Republic, sided with Pompey and demanded that Caesar disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar knew that to return without his army was to face arrest, political ruin, or even execution. In January 49 BC, he arrived at the Rubicon River, which marked the official boundary between his province and Italy proper. Roman law strictly forbade any general from leading his army across this river. His dilemma was absolute: obey the Senate and relinquish power, or cross the river and start a civil war against his friend Pompey and the Republic itself. Caesar is said to have declared Alea iacta est, the die is cast, as he led his 13th legion across the shallow river. This single act was the death blow to the Republic. The phrase crossing the Rubicon remains synonymous with making an irreversible decision. A rapid civil war followed. Pompey, surprised by Caesar's speed and daring, fled Rome. Caesar pursued him across the Mediterranean, ultimately defeating him at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC. Pompey fled to Egypt, where he was assassinated, much to Caesar's supposed dismay. Returning victorious, Caesar became the undisputed master of the Roman world, taking the unprecedented title of Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. He implemented sweeping reforms, including a revised calendar. However, his dictatorial powers confirmed the Senate's worst fears. On the Ides of March 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated by a conspiracy of senators, including his protege Marcus Junius Brutus, who claimed they were acting to save the Republic. The Republic was indeed dead, but the assassins failed to restore it. Caesar's legacy was the final proof that Rome could only be ruled by one man, and his death plunged the Roman world into another brutal decade of civil war. The first emperor, Augustus, and the birth of the Pax Romana. Julius Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March did not save the Roman Republic. It simply guaranteed its final, bloody transition. The ensuing power vacuum was initially filled by the Second Triumvirate, consisting of Caesar's loyal general Mark Antony, the wealthy politician Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, and Caesar's young, unexpected heir, Gaius Octavius, later known as Octavian. The three men swiftly hunted down the assassins, defeating Brutus and Cassius at the Battle of Philippi in 42 BC. But once vengeance was achieved, the triumvirate fractured. Lepidus was marginalized, leaving the world to be divided between the West, controlled by the methodical Octavian, and the East, controlled by the charismatic Mark Antony. Antony, establishing his base in Egypt, became romantically and politically allied with Queen Cleopatra VII. To the Roman public and Octavian, this union was a dangerous Eastern threat to Roman identity and power. Octavian skillfully used propaganda to portray Antony as a slave to foreign luxury, determined to move the capital of the Roman world to Alexandria. The final civil war of the Roman Republic culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's forces decisively defeated the combined naval forces of Antony and Cleopatra. Antony and Cleopatra later committed suicide in Egypt, and Octavian annexed the ancient kingdom, ending the 3-century-long Ptolemaic dynasty. With all rivals eliminated, Octavian was the sole uncontested ruler of the Roman world. He faced a crucial choice: seize dictatorial power, risking Caesar's fate, or find a legal, stable way to govern. In 27 BC, Octavian performed one of the greatest political maneuvers in history. He formally restored the Republic to the Senate and the people. In reality, he simply retained control of the key provinces and legions. The Senate, grateful for the return to stability after a century of civil war, granted him the title Augustus, meaning revered one. Augustus became the first Roman emperor. He ruled by consolidating power under republican titles, princeps or first citizen, rather than by outright monarchy. His reign inaugurated the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, a 200-year period of unprecedented stability, prosperity, and cultural achievement across the massive Roman domain. The bloodletting was over. The institutions of the Republic were replaced by the enduring power of the emperor. Rome, which began as a small state built on a riverbank, was now a stable, magnificent empire, unified under the iron will and political genius of its first emperor, Augustus. The Golden Age, the Pax Romana, and the Five Good Emperors. The reign of Augustus ushered in the Pax Romana, Roman peace, an era lasting over 2 centuries where the vast Roman world was relatively free from large-scale conflict and enjoyed tremendous economic and cultural flourishing. The empire was stable, the roads were safe, and trade boomed from Britain to Egypt. Following the initial Julio-Claudian dynasty, which included notorious emperors like Caligula and Nero, who tested the limits of the new imperial power, Rome entered its most stable phase under the Five Good Emperors, 96–180 AD, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. These emperors were known for their competent administration, stability, and peaceful successions. often choosing their successor based on merit rather than bloodline. Their reigns marked the height of Roman power and influence. The empire reached its greatest geographical extent under the second of these emperors, Trajan, 98–117 AD. Trajan, a non-Italian and the first emperor from a province, Spain, was a brilliant military strategist. He conquered Dacia, modern Romania, which yielded enormous gold reserves and expanded the empire deep into the Middle East, briefly taking Mesopotamia and reaching the Persian Gulf. At its zenith under Trajan, the empire spanned 3 continents, controlled nearly 5.9 million square kilometers, and governed perhaps 50 to 90 million people. The subsequent emperors, recognizing that the empire had reached its natural limits, focused on consolidation rather than further conquest. Hadrian, 117–138 AD, famously toured the entire empire and ordered the construction of Hadrian's Wall across northern Britain. This 73-mile-long fortification was a clear strategic shift. It was not built for attack, but to define and protect the established borders from external threats. Under the Pax Romana, the key Roman gift to the world flourished: infrastructure and law. Cities across the provinces were built with aqueducts, sewers, baths, and theaters. Roman law was codified and standardized, providing a framework for justice that extended across disparate cultures. The legions, no longer focused on endless expansion, became guardians of the frontier. The period culminated with Marcus Aurelius, 161–180 AD, the philosopher-emperor, whose personal writings became the foundational texts of Stoicism. Yet, even during his reign, the first cracks in the Pax Romana began to show. The empire faced devastating plagues, and increasingly aggressive tribal movements along the northern frontiers began to challenge Rome's stability. The Golden Age was ending, giving way to an age of constant crisis and change. Descent into anarchy, the crisis of the 3rd century. The death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 AD signaled the end of the Pax Romana. The stability and prosperity that had defined the Golden Age were violently replaced by a period known as the crisis of the 3rd century, 235–284 AD, a catastrophic 50-year span that nearly destroyed the Roman Empire. The crisis was marked by 3 simultaneous crippling challenges. 1. Political instability, the Barracks Emperors. The era saw an almost complete breakdown of imperial succession. In the span of just 49 years, there were approximately 26 official emperors and countless other pretenders, many of whom were installed and assassinated by their own legions. These Barracks Emperors rarely ruled long enough to implement policy, as the army, now recognizing its ultimate power, auctioned the throne to the highest bidder or the most successful general. Twined economic collapse, rampant military spending, civil wars, and the need to pay increasingly demanding legions led emperors to debase the Roman coinage. They drastically reduced the silver and gold content of the currency, replacing it with cheaper metals. This move resulted in hyperinflation, shattering public trust in the currency and crippling the vast integrated economy of the empire. Trade declined, and people retreated from cities to local self-sufficient estates. 3. Military pressure. The weakened central authority led to severe breakdowns on the massive frontiers. Aggressive barbarian groups, including the Goths, Franks, and Alemanni, saw their chance and launched devastating raids deep into imperial territory. At one point, the empire fractured into 3 pieces: the Central Roman state, the breakaway Gallic Empire in the west, and the Palmyrene Empire in the east. The empire was hemorrhaging territory, wealth, and confidence. It was only through the efforts of a few dedicated, ruthless emperors, like Aurelian, who managed to temporarily reunite the fragments and build the massive Aurelian walls around Rome, that the empire survived this period of near-total anarchy. The crisis proved that the sprawling, unified model of the early empire was no longer viable. Survival would require radical, even dictatorial restructuring of the entire state. The next great emperor would abandon the pretense of the old republic forever and impose order through unprecedented authoritarianism and division. Rebuilding and redefining, division, reform, and Christianity. The Roman Empire was saved from the brink of collapse by 2 monumental figures, Diocletian and Constantine. They abandoned the old, dysfunctional republican facade and transformed the state into an authoritarian bureaucracy, ensuring survival at the cost of liberty. Diocletian 284–305 AD recognized that the empire was simply too vast and complex for one man to rule and defend effectively. His radical solution was the Tetrarchy, or rule of four. He divided the empire into the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, placing an Augustus, senior emperor, and a Caesar, junior emperor successor, in charge of each half. This system brought temporary stability to the succession crisis and allowed for better management of the frontiers. Diocletian also implemented severe economic and administrative reforms to combat hyperinflation and stabilize the government, attempting to fix prices and stabilize the currency. However, he is also remembered for launching the Great Persecution, the empire's last and fiercest campaign to suppress the growing presence of Christianity. The Tetrarchy eventually collapsed, leading to another civil war. The ultimate victor was Constantine the Great. His triumph is often attributed to a crucial event in 312 AD at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, where, according to legend, he saw a Christian sign, the Chi Rho, in the sky and adopted it as his standard. In 313 AD, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, which legalized Christianity throughout the empire, ending centuries of persecution and fundamentally altering the religious identity of the Roman world. From a persecuted sect, Christianity began its ascent toward becoming the state religion. Constantine's second monumental act was strategic. Recognizing the increasing wealth and stability of the East, he founded a massive new capital city on the site of the old Greek city of Byzantium, naming it Constantinople, city of Constantine, in 330 AD. This city, strategically located on the Bosporus, had access to rich trade routes and defensible borders, moving the political center of gravity away from Rome. The decisions of Diocletian and Constantine formalized the division of the empire into a Greek-speaking, wealthier East and a Latin-speaking, increasingly fragile West. While these reforms ensured the immediate survival of the Roman state, they also guaranteed that when the final storm came, the two halves would face it separately. The final collapse, barbarian invasions, and the end of the West. The reforms of the 4th century saved the Roman state, but they could not save the Western Roman Empire. While the East flourished, anchored by Constantinople's wealth, the West was slowly consumed by a lethal combination of economic decay, political corruption, and massive external pressures. The immediate trigger for the final collapse was a series of unprecedented migrations. Beginning in the late 4th century, the ferocious Huns, led by figures like Attila, pushed Germanic tribes westward, displacing groups like the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths. These tribes, fleeing the Huns, sought refuge and land within the relatively porous borders of the Western Empire. The Romans often handled these migrants disastrously. In 378 AD, the Visigoths, after being treated brutally by Roman officials, revolted. At the Battle of Adrianople, they annihilated the Roman army and killed the Eastern Emperor Valens. This defeat was a turning point, proving that the legions were no longer invincible and that the Goths could defeat Rome on its own terms. The crisis culminated when the Visigoths, led by Alaric, marched on Italy. In 410 AD, they successfully sacked the city of Rome itself. Although Rome was no longer the political capital, the psychological shock of the Eternal City falling for the first time in 800 years was immense. The invasions continued relentlessly. The Vandals seized North Africa, the primary source of Rome's grain supply, crippling the West's economy. In 455 AD, the Vandals sailed to Rome and conducted an even more thorough sacking than the Visigoths. The Western emperors became little more than puppets, often controlled by powerful barbarian generals who nominally served Rome while exerting true military power. The imperial system finally flickered out in 476 AD. In that year, a Germanic chieftain named Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, a young boy ironically named Romulus Augustulus, Little Augustus. Odoacer chose not to take the title of emperor himself, instead sending the imperial regalia back to the Eastern Emperor in Constantinople. The event, though relatively quiet at the time, is traditionally cited as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Rome, the village that built the world, was gone. Yet the story of Rome was far from over. In the East, the other half of the empire would continue to thrive for another 1,000 years, preserving the flame of Roman law, culture, and power.
The Eternal Flame, the Byzantine Empire and Rome's lasting legacy. The final official deposition of a Western emperor in 476 AD did not mean the total disappearance of Roman civilization. In the East, the other half of the empire, the Byzantine Empire, continued its vibrant existence from its impregnable capital, Constantinople. The Byzantines viewed themselves simply as Romans. They preserved Roman law, military tradition, and bureaucracy, but shifted their culture toward Greek language and the Christian faith. Their greatest emperor, Justinian I, 527-565 AD, attempted to reconquer the lost Western territories, briefly restoring Roman rule over Italy and North Africa, and more importantly, codifying centuries of Roman law into the foundational Corpus Juris Civilis. For another 1,000 years after the West fell, the Byzantine Empire stood as the bulwark of Christianity, preserving classical Greek and Roman texts and holding back successive waves of invaders. Their final fall came only in 1453, when Constantinople was conquered by the Ottoman Turks, an event that marks the definitive end of the Roman imperial state. But Rome's true legacy is not defined by its borders or the date of a final collapse. It is defined by the infrastructure of Western civilization it left behind. Consider the permanence of Rome's achievements. Law. Concepts of civil law, property rights, and innocent until proven guilty are Roman inventions. Architecture. The arch, the dome, and concrete were used to build roads, bridges, and aqueducts, many of which are still standing today. Language. Latin forms the root of the Romance languages, French, Spanish, Italian, and still shapes 60% of the English vocabulary. Governance. The very idea of a senate, a republic, and a codified constitution are echoes of the Roman political experiment. The Roman Empire never truly died. It simply evolved and fractured. Its legal codes were adopted by medieval kingdoms, its roads became trade routes, and its language became the lingua franca of scholars and the church for a millennium. Rome, the small village founded on 7 hills, did not just conquer a world. It built a lasting framework for civilization that continues to shape our political thought, our languages, and our streets. From the legions of Caesar to the domes of Constantinople, the history of Rome is the story of how power, innovation, and an unwavering belief in their own destiny allowed one people to build the world we still inhabit.